in February of 2020, I was hit by a car when I was biking home. And that was the first time that I got psychedelics because I might have had potential spinal injury.
Yep.
I was given ketamine instead of like a painkiller. I was afraid of psychedelics. I tried them a couple times recreationally in high school.
Yeah.
And they were fun, but I had some bad experiences too because I was still in that mindset.
They tell the primary care doctors now, do not put anybody on a benzodiazepine. Mm-hmm. We have other things like mindfulness meditation. We have all of these other things that they can do. And they said, if you have patients who are on benzodiazepines, do not take them off of them. Let them be. Oh, here we go. You know, we had a little bit of technical difficulty on getting this thing going, but that's real life, right? Welcome to the nurseMARK podcast, everybody. I'm your host, nurseMARK, and I'm so happy to kick off this new series all around psychedelics and psychedelic medicine with a specific focus on the stories, the personal stories about how these amazing medicines work in your life. My gosh, so I have the honor, the pleasure of having my friend, author of The Way of Emotions, amongst other things, amazing human being, Jake Trigg. Jake, welcome to the show. I'm honored to have you here, man.
Yeah, nurseMARK, thank you so much for having me. I look forward to this conversation about psychedelics.
Yeah, it's going to be fun because we've got a little bit of a delay. We got recording locally going on. We're using all of the technology of today, except for we're not using any of like the filters. I wish we had a filter for like turkey neck. Wouldn't that be fucking spectacular? That's going to be my contribution to the baby boomers. It's going to be a fucking turkey neck filter. I think this will be it. Anyway, who were you before psychedelics? Because we know that you're not the same afterwards. You know, who were you before? What was your life like? And what really brought you to want to have a psychedelic experience? I know for me, it drove me. I just knew it was going to be something that I did. What got you there, and what's life been like since?
Yeah. So my shift happened about 3 years ago, as a lot of us did when 2020 came around. And so leading up to 2020, I thought I was making a lot of really solid progress in my life. Like I had a dream job at the time. I was married. I had kids, still have kids. And
I noticed the past tense on the marriage, but we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, I was in this place where I thought I was doing really well. And that was really like, I was doing well compared to what I knew at the time. And where I'm at now has been such an expansion of that. What I've realized is I was a person that was very limited in my own view. And I had a lot of stories from my childhood of not being safe, and that that it wasn't safe to share my voice. And so that really like guided my entire experience. And there were like traumas just throughout my life, and I didn't know where these were coming from. And it was really in February of 2020, I was hit by a car when I was biking home.
A lot happened in February of 2020, brother.
A lot. Yeah. So I was, I was hit by a car. And that was the first time that I got psychedelics because I might have had potential spinal injury. Yep. I was given ketamine instead of like a painkiller.
And for folks who don't know, that's a beautiful psychedelic medicine that they use. They use in the ER, and they use on, as you know now, Jake, they use on the ambulance a lot. Paramedics will use it a lot because it's so super safe.
Yeah, exactly. And it gave me the relief of this intense physical pain, and sort of like pulled me back from myself. And I didn't really think too much of that experience, but then coming back out of it, it really felt like a second chance on life. and it felt like I was given this other opportunity to make a new life. And at that point, that's when my ex-wife sat down on the end of the bed and said she didn't trust me when I was recovering, and that was a incredible blow. Looking back, I can see where that came from, but at the time, it just came out of nowhere. We were going to therapists and we were working on our stuff, but it was just really like, wow, okay, all right. And so in that recovery process, that's where I really went in deep. And I've been studying, doing yoga, practicing yoga for 20 years prior to that, and meditation, but I never had this really intense pain to try to escape from. So I was doing a ton of meditations and body scans and really like focusing on trying to escape this pain. And that's what drove me eventually to psychedelics. It was, then COVID hit. After all that, then COVID. Uh, and so then I was at a place where about a year later, I was like, okay, I really need to work through these things. And so I started doing men's work and started doing coaching. And that's when I was able to start identifying these limiting beliefs. And at that same time, I was incredibly depressed and so much anxiety. And those were states that I was actually in my entire life. Like I realize now, being free from that, how much I was depressed and how much I was anxious,
Mm-hmm.
leading up until fixing those underlying ideas because of childhood setting that bar of not being safe and then
Dude,
living a whole life safe.
all of what I do is based on that, right? All of what I do in the healing space is based on going way back to the original sin, so to speak, the original program that got in play, when you're like 4 or 5 years old.
Yep.
That's the base it all starts from, right?
Yeah.
Getting back to that is where the healing begins.
Yeah. And all of that stuff happens on that unconscious level, right? That's
Completely.
before the age of 7 is most of
Yeah.
it. And that's when we have these programs installed. And where psychedelics really help us reach that and access those levels is by sort of, toying with the consciousness and bringing us into that unconscious state so that then we can see these things that are there.
Yeah. How do they, and everybody wants to know, right? We're meaning making machines. Everybody's like, well, how does it work specifically? Well, I don't know. How does olanzapine work? A $6 billion atypical antipsychotic that the first line in the insert says, we believe the mechanism of action to be. It's like, I don't fucking know. We never have any real idea. So yeah.
We just rely on the direct experiences, right? It's like, what do you get out of it? And we try to explain by words, but we really feel it in our bodies.
That is the truth right there, brother. I mean, you had the ketamine. That wasn't when you first, was that the first time that you thought about something? Like, was that experience something that piqued your interest, or had you had some other experiences or access to sort of the psychedelic medicine conversation? How'd you get to the psychedelic medicine path?
Yeah, I really didn't know. I was afraid of psychedelics. I had tried them a couple times recreationally in high school.
Yeah.
And they were fun, but I had some bad experiences too, because I was still in that mindset. Having ketamine during that wreck was really like, wow, there's such relief there. So during one of the most intense times of my life, suddenly feeling great and having relief from that. And so I think that sort of left an imprint.
Yep.
So that then later on, I started reading about ketamine and about Mind Bloom and other places. Really, my entry into psychedelics was as an escape from the pain that I had.
Yeah.
And the addictions that I had built up in order to avoid that pain.
Isn't that how we deal with it, right? Yeah.
It is.
We self-soothe.
We self-soothe in the ways that we know. And I think one of the things that I really, love helping people and talking about is like addictions to video games and addictions to things like pot. and
Food.
porn and food. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so many of these are almost prescribed by society as being okay.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Yeah.
so,
Like, hey, you know what? You had a rough day. Go home and have a drink.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So anyway, I knew that I needed to change these things. I was in that pattern of addiction and wanting to do it. But the thing about an addiction is when a real addiction is when you want to escape it, but you can't do it. Like you're just continually in that pattern, no matter what, when still wanting to.
Yeah.
Um, and so I read about ketamine being able to help with that. And so that's when I was seeing a therapist, also doing men's work and coaching, and then added in ketamine and did some at-home sessions. And those just, I mean, I'd never felt so peaceful in my entire life.
Uh,
It was that relief. And
uh,
so I can see how it's so, helpful for people with PTSD like myself,
yeah.
of being this like little stress ball and then suddenly like, oh, okay, life can be so
I
ease and
love
joy.
it. I think it's magic. I think it's just a beautiful entryway into the psychedelic medicine space. And
Wow.
it's been, ketamine's been an anesthetic. That's the primary use since 1970, right?
Mm.
So it's been in play for a very long time as an anesthetic. You know how they got to this depression thing?
How?
They noticed that when people would come out of anesthesia, they'd be sort of happy. And the reports the docs got afterwards were people were feeling really good after their surgery. Like it went really well. I feel good. And anecdotal evidence kind of drew it into the space of, well, let's see what's going on here because
Mhm.
there's a phenomenon. And in medicine, we always look at these anecdotal evidence pieces and say, I wonder, can this be
Mhm.
replicated? Is this, what's really happening? Yeah. And now, of course, we have the studies that show that it's this amazing gift drug that can take people right out of suicidality. It can relieve their depression. It can take care of their pain. So many different things. For me,
Mhm.
it's just a beautiful entryway into the other psychedelic medicine modalities. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah,
Because,
that was such a big part of it because it is, for me, it very
uh-huh.
much was a trip or an experience of transporting, leaving the body, being moved, so much movement and color and transitions.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I still remember one of the experiences that really stuck with me is I had an intention of finding what parts of myself I wanted to heal.
yeah.
And I had this experience of my body just being pulled open and my neck exposed, and then someone coming with a piece of glass and holding it up to my neck. And that was a representation of this fear that I had of sharing my voice. But in the moment, normally I would be like super scared about that. But it just felt like liberation because it was showing this fear that it was inside that I wasn't able to see. And now I was faced with it because ketamine has you in that sedated state. Your body doesn't, my body didn't react, right? So it didn't react. And so instead it was just this really cathartic,
Oh,
dark experience that was like, oh yeah,
oh,
throat chakra. I need to be speaking more and using this.
yes, yes, yes. Oh, it's amazing. And that's part of what I've been diving into recently in some shamanic training that I'm a part of is
Ooh,
really the energetic body and chakras and really connecting to that whole space, which in Western medicine, we call that bullshit, right? I mean, basically in Western medicine, they'd say, yeah, we're not interested in the energetic body, spirit, spirituality, any of that stuff. Not our domain. We're going to talk about the physicality. And in the cases of the transformations we're talking about right now, man, it's about that energetic spiritual being, and that in turn repairs the physical being that we are. Oh, this amazing vessel. Aren't we just amazing?
Yeah,
It's so beautiful.
we're born, and our natural right is ease and joy and liberation, and we are free flowing light beings. And then we get these programs that say we have to restrict this certain thing or restrict this part of ourself.
Yes.
And so what we're doing this work is really to clear it. It's really to just remove obstacles and get back to how we
Yeah.
naturally are.
Yeah. And again, going way back to that original obstacle that was put in place that everything else is built on, man. You gotta get to that base and the rest of the shit'll topple away.
Yep, exactly. You no longer need the protective mechanisms once you can face the fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So you're in this journey, you're utilizing ketamine. Where'd you go from there?
Yeah, so ketamine, I did about 18 sessions
Yep.
of that over the
I loved it,
course
by the way. It
of
worked really well
a
for my
year.
treatment resistant depression, just to kick in there. It helped to alleviate it. Didn't cure it.
Nope.
It alleviated it. So go on. I'm sorry to break in.
Yeah, no, exactly. It was, yeah, it was, it's temporary relief, but for someone that hasn't ever felt that, that can be the difference between wanting to live or not, like to be
Yeah.
able to feel so free. And for the first time ever for me
Yeah.
was so incredible. Um, and so yeah, and during that time also, so I was looking for other things, and I saw a post by a friend and a fellow brother from One Heart, and he shared his story that was so similar to mine, and how he had had these breakthroughs uh, working with One Heart and with ayahuasca.
Uh,
And so then that was the thread that pulled me into other medicines.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so it was in that initiation, so in that decision to go to One Heart, um, I applied and then realized that I couldn't go if I was still taking any sort of medications. And I was taking some medication for anxiety for 20 years or something like that.
Yeah.
But it was my commitment to go to One Heart that then I said, okay, I'm going to drop these medications. And so there was certainly a process in that. It was incredibly
Oh, I can only imagine you were on a benzodiazepine.
difficult. I forget what it was.
And
Lexapro.
those are notoriously the worst to ever. You know what they tell the primary care doctors now, Jake? I went
What?
to a conference a year or so ago, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
primary care conference. And so they're talking about all the things relative to primary care doctors. They tell the primary care doctors now, do not put anybody on a benzodiazepine. We
Mm-hmm.
have other things like mindfulness meditation. We have all of these other things that they can do.
Yeah.
I was pretty excited to hear this. And they said, if you have patients who are on benzodiazepines, do not take them off of them. Leave
Mm-hmm.
them on, prescribe, let them be, because it's
Yeah.
just going to be so hard to unravel that drug. It has such an effect. It's very good at getting rid of anxiety. Unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
you have to keep taking it forever and ever and ever and ever and
Yeah.
increasing doses. Yeah.
Increase it. Exactly. Yeah. The same amount wasn't doing it for me anymore. And,
Yeah.
that was my body telling me that to work with the underlying issues instead of treating the symptoms
Yeah.
with medication.
So you're
But
on this medication and you can't go to One Heart because that you and I, that's where we met. I mean, we met at One
yes.
Heart. Like we're brothers because of that experience. And so you had to tackle this beast, this 20-year beast to be able to even go to One Heart because, for folks who don't know, ayahuasca is a very powerful psychedelic medicine, wonderful, amazing, sacred medicine. But there are a lot of drug to drug interactions. So when you're on medications, you have to be off your medications to go on this journey.
So it was a commitment. It's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time and knew that I needed to.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is something that is best to do with support. So I was still in contact with my doctor, who didn't really believe that I would be able to get off of them.
Right.
Working with the
Because
therapist.
experience would tell us, sorry,
Exactly.
motherfucker, you're going to be on these for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Welcome
So,
aboard.
but through the right support,
Yeah.
anybody can get off them.
Yeah.
And there are all kinds of,
What'd you
helpful
do?
things.
I'd really love to dive into that, man, because I'm sure there are going to be a ton of listeners who are,
Yeah.
on the benzo train, and we've all been there.
Yeah.
How were you able to do it? Because 20 years on benzos is a long time. We're talking about Xanax and Ativan and,
Mm,
Klonopin and the like. How were you able to do it? Because they're super addictive, right? So by addictive, meaning when you stop them, you have
mhm.
physical and mental symptoms of withdrawal. Like, it's harsh. How did you
Yeah.
do it? I mean, how long did it take you? What was your way of getting through that? Because it's tough. I mean, my God, I applaud
Yeah.
you, brother, that you're there, right?
Yeah. There
Yeah.
was, there was definitely some divine intervention. There was some faith involved along the way as well.
Uh-huh.
Um, because it was when I was seeking the escape from all of the pains and the thoughts and all of that. At one point, I actually got that, and so at one point, and this was not right after a ketamine session. This was after it just was sort of like sudden, and it was like my mind was just wiped clean, and I felt like a baby, and I didn't know if I could work anymore. I didn't know how to cook. I didn't like there was just this clean slate.
Wow.
And I was trying to figure out what it is that I want and what my desires are. And I remember thinking, like, I just want to have a desire. So the only desire that I had was to have a desire. And because it felt so clear. But it was a very weird position to be in. But coming out of that, like, I suddenly just didn't, I could not play video games. And that was something that was one of my main addictions,
Really?
was video games. And I just had this incredible aversion and sensitivity to it. I couldn't watch any TV. I couldn't watch, like,
Oh, super
pretty
heightened
much
senses, huh?
super heightened senses. I consider this part of my Kundalini awakening, which is why I'm a Kundalini yoga teacher now. And I think that that's something that's probably more prevalent than we realize in society, because I believe we all have Kundalini and it can activate at any time and have different symptoms or powers.
Yes.
So I think that was like sort of part of what happened for me. But that just made me more sensitive to everything. And so there was I took a lot of walks outside. I grounded every day. Started paying really close attention to my diet. Went to the pool a lot, sat in parks and read spirituality for like months. And
Really?
I had a lot of time off from work as well. And so it was just this sort of like meditating a lot, and sitting with the pains. So instead of avoiding them like I had done my entire life
Yep.
through addictions, I would just sit with it and feel
Ooh.
it.
So you're
Uh,
sitting with this stuff before you even get to One Heart and the ayahuasca ceremonies.
Sitting with it. And then I also learned through coaching ways of expressing. And so I think of all of these as emotions. And I think one emotion that we don't often classify is hurt. So I think see hurt as an actual emotion.
Huh.
So you have fear, sadness, anger, shame. Hurt, pain can actually be an emotion too. And so I had a lot of this
Yeah.
pain from the withdrawals and sitting with that. And I learned a lot of techniques as well too, and started practicing like daily techniques for expressing emotions. So
Uh-huh.
like hitting pillows and crying. And
Yeah.
there was a month where I cried like every day. And what that was is I was just, looking at going into my body and saying, what is it that I need to feel? And I was feeling all this stuff from my life, all of these moments. I was doing a lot of visualization of inner child work and going back
Yeah.
in time and letting that come up. But it
Yeah.
was really a period of intense work with my emotions because I hadn't ever felt them.
And there they were. They're resident in every cell, right? So you were just purging and purging and
Yeah.
purging all
Yes.
of it.
For a
How
long.
beautiful is that?
Yeah. I
Oh,
mean, looking back, it is.
yeah, I know. Going through it, not so beautiful. Like we like to say, Jake, getting to the psychedelic experience and then having the psychedelic experience is not for the faint of heart. Like
Mm,
there is a lot to consider, and which is why a lot of people never get there. Especially, I have to say, especially folks who are in that anxiety track,
mm,
because they have to create that box of a world to stay in so that they don't trigger the anxiety. It's
yeah.
hard for them to consider being out of control on a
Yeah.
psychedelic experience. I mean, you're,
Yeah.
you're one bold motherfucker.
Yeah, no, that played out really early in the ketamine
Is that
journeys
right?
because from the wreck, my breath was really limited, and so I was paying attention to it, and I was worried that if I lost consciousness, I would stop breathing, and that was like a theme in the first like 4 or 5 times where I
Wow.
was really like focused so much on my breath and afraid to let it go because I might die. Um, and then it was just sitting through that and then eventually realizing, oh no, okay, my body knows how to breathe.
Yeah, like we do it 20,000 times a day without even thinking about it, right? It's
Yeah.
only when we start to look at it and notice it, we get freaky. We're like, "Oh shit." I've had that
Yeah.
happen when I get super high on cannabis, which I don't much, but I've had some experiences where all of a sudden you start thinking about your breathing and you get worried that I'm going to forget how.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, never going to happen. You'll pass out and continue to breathe.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh man, so that you took you had a road to get to your ayahuasca experience.
It was. Yeah, there was a lot of clearing, a lot of the pre work. Um, every time before I do ayahuasca, I feel really good. Like right before it,
Yeah.
like I feel like at a peak, and then the journey happens, and I'm like, what? Afterwards, like, what just happened? Who am I?
Ooh,
Where am I at? And
yeah.
everything, and then there's the returning back to normal. But I just find it really interesting, like to feel really good right before it. Because when I first wanted to go and do ayahuasca, it was to escape feeling bad, and
Yeah.
so then it's like there's so much of the work that happens outside of the experience itself. Once you commit to doing something like a
It's the
psychedelic or
integration work
anything,
post for me. It's
yeah,
the
it's not.
unraveling of the experience. You have your experience, it's 6, 7, 8 hours. And then there's the unraveling of all of what happens in that. You can't even call it a time frame because you're not in time,
No.
right? You're outside of time. But when you dip back in, it was like this 7, 8 hour stretch. What, as you said, what the fuck just happened?
Uh-huh.
It takes in all of the stuff that afterwards, weeks and weeks and weeks afterwards, I still have insight and experience. And we were there in what, August
August.
of 22?
Mhm.
And I'm still today having insights, getting what we call downloads, right? That's the chic bougie word I think that everybody uses. I'm getting my downloads. I
Yep.
still have them today. Imagine that. It's like all that time that's passed in between those experiences and until today. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
so much information that comes in that it takes a while to unravel all of that.
Yeah. So bro, knowing you post or meeting you at One Heart, not knowing your history of depression and anxiety and the things that you had gone through, learning that as we were sharing that One Heart experience, I see the aftermath And I don't even want to call it that. I see the glorious life that you have now. You wrote a book, which, oh my God, I have a copy of it right here. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm getting ready to send it to my grandson. It's a
Mhm.
great book. Fabulous book. Tell us about that. Tell us about the writing of this book.
Yeah. Yeah. So the way of emotions, so that came about as really like, because my own personal journey, the biggest shift for me was in emotions. And when I was hit by that car, after that, I was suddenly feeling stuff that I had never felt before. And so the last 3 years has been really just like deep dive focus on how to clear or work with these emotions. And so I wanted to write a book. Like, one of the purposes is selfish, it's just to rewrite my own story. And so it's to say,
It's beautiful.
like, the main character, not the main character, but the character that it starts with, his name is Jake.
Yeah.
And so what I'm doing here is just saying, going back to my childhood and giving myself a tool that I wish I had had. And in
Right.
doing so, now I'm going to give it to kids and parents as
Yeah.
well. Um, and so the way it comes from a lot of different spiritual practices and books that I've read, like Byron Katie is a big inspiration for it,
Yep.
in her acceptance. And WAY stands for witness, accept, and express.
Uh-huh.
And so I saw this in coaching work, and I saw people go from just like states of fight or flight into being free just on a Zoom call. And so I just kind of took all of these processes and synthesized it into something that I think can work and actually be fun for kids and parents.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's
and
amazing. It's an amazing book. It's so beautiful.
thank
Powerful.
you.
Powerful.
Well, it's leading to expression, right? So kids are naturally gifted at expression, and animals do this too. Like, if animals get in a fight, then they'll go and just like shake it off, and then they'll be fine. Or say like a kid has a tantrum, and as an adult, you sit with it and help them regulate their emotions, and then the kid gets up and then they're like smiling and they're happy. But
Yeah.
the adult will have this residue left over of like, oh, did we really just like sit through all of that yelling and screaming? And so it's like hard to look at the kid and be like the same, because as adults we sort of like hold on to this and we don't fully release and express.
Right.
Um, and so I wanted to give this like bridge between adults and kids, where we have these practice, witness and accept, something that adults can benefit from and kids will learn, and then express, kids already do, and then having adults learn to express, relearn to express as well.
Right. Right.
So that's the thinking behind it.
You're right. We have this residue, right? So I always had an issue, or have had an issue, with confrontation. And every time we would get in confrontation, it would be me, 5 years old, speaking to my father. Didn't matter
Mm,
if it was my partner at the time, business, wherever it was me talking to my father,
yep.
which I didn't have a voice. So then I wouldn't have a voice. Like, it was this amazing psychological experience, right?
Yeah.
Had I had the capacity of the understanding of the way, oof, powerful. So
Mm,
had to step back and straighten all that stuff out. Now, happy to say, I can have those moments. I remember, I had a best friend growing up at that age, 5, 6 years old. We would get into the most awful fights. 5 minutes later, it was like nothing ever happened.
yeah.
Beautiful. Now, if you have one of those fights, you may never talk to your brother or sister again in this lifetime. I know so many people who are just, I haven't talked to my brother in 30 years. What a tragedy for
Hmm.
both.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
residue.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yeah, these are
so this is published post, you know, post psychedelic experience, post ayahuasca.
yeah.
You got on it and you made this happen.
Yeah,
What do you
yeah,
do?
like going
Yeah.
into the journey, I had several threads that I wanted to work on. And it was after One Heart that I was thinking, okay, where's the best place to focus? And this book was
Yep.
the best place to focus, to be able to try to make the most impact where I really care about, which is with kids, and for fathers and mothers, kids. Um, and yeah, and so the story, like, there, while we were there, we did a sweat lodge ceremony, and the person that put it on, had just such a beautiful perspective of the world, and he talked about how in villages the father was the sun and the mother was the earth, and so children, they all were brothers and sisters with older, right? So your actual mother, you have many mothers within a tribe, and so there wasn't this like two parents and kids, and then that's the unit. It was this tribal unit,
Right.
um, and that like really stuck with me. Like it was such a beautiful view of the world, and coming out of One Heart, like community has been such a focus for me of wanting and seeking. I learned through One Heart how powerful community is. And so those themes were put into the book. That's where the sort of the theme of a tribe comes from, is wanting to show that, and returning to these natural laws or natural ways of living.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so powerful. It really is. And completely as a, as a result of our experience of just pulling the layers away and just being those 5-year-olds again. I mean, I really can see us there, like the day ceremony, everybody dancing and singing and just being 5 years old again. There was nothing in the way, like none of this human experience, none of the shit and layers of stuff that gets in the way, all of it gone.
Hmm.
Yeah. In
Yeah.
in such a powerful way. And the community is amazing. So you have this book you published. It's available on Amazon, everybody. So look for it, and we'll have links in the show notes. Don't worry, you'll be able to get it. It is really an amazing book. So you write the book, and now, by the way, folks, Jake is a hell of a guitar player and singer. Like he is just, I mean, he's a multifaceted, talented individual, right? So he's got that going on. Amazing. But you're also teaching yoga. What's going
Yeah.
on in that whole thing? I
Yeah.
see this whole program that you've put together. So I'm kind of having a little FOMO because I'm not in Austin where you are. I'm over here in Raleigh. And
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I know that we'll meet
Oh, hell
here
yes.
soon, and you'll be able to
Yeah.
experience the yoga for joy. Um,
So
yeah.
what's going on with that? Tell me about the yoga thing.
Yeah, it's an experiment at this stage, and I was thinking, okay, I got the book. How do I do something with this as an extension of it?
Yeah.
And I've practiced yoga for over 20 years, and I'm now certified as a Kundalini yoga teacher. I got certified before I even took a Kundalini yoga class because Kundalini energy I became very familiar with, and I realized I needed to learn and work with it. I figured it out, and so that's what brought me to doing Kundalini yoga.
Oof.
And the class that I'm teaching is called Yoga for Joy. The concept there
Who?
is, there's a quote
Yeah.
from Buddha that any emotion, if you sit with it long enough, it turns to joy.
So I heard a quote. My gosh, I think it's Deepak Chopra. And the quote is, happiness and sadness are mental constructs. Joy
Mm,
is a spiritual condition
mm,
that is
love
not
that.
affected by both of those.
I love that.
I'm
That's
paraphrasing Deepak,
yeah,
really,
yeah,
forgive me, but that's what I got out of it. And oh my gosh, I just love
yep,
that because you know me, I'm a joyful motherfucker. Like I live in
mhm,
joy all the time. Doesn't preclude me from having sadness and happiness in
yep,
equal measure in my life. As a matter
yep,
of fact, I've come to believe that the darkness, the sadness, those suicidal moments have been my greatest teachers, and I love them so dearly. Oh, the
yeah.
greatest. Yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, you're speaking to it. Like joy is our natural birthright and our natural state, and you can
absolutely.
see it in children very easily.
Yeah.
And that's why you look in a baby's eyes and you feel that deep, deep joy. So the yoga for joy is about exploring these emotions that sit above joy. And it's about doing postures and music, having music that's in the resonance with these postures and these emotions and the chakras that we're going through. And these, it's all to stimulate a particular emotion and to witness it. So just to say, okay, anger,
Uh-huh.
where is that in my body? What does it feel like? Does it have a texture? Does it have a sound? As you're doing a relatively intense kundalini posture,
Yeah.
and then accepting it. So like anger, like as you're doing the punches, thinking about that anger and just allowing it to be, and then breathing it in, and then releasing and expressing that emotion that you had built up.
Love
And
it.
then and we go through that like pretty quick, um, through the five core negative emotions,
Uh-huh.
and then we move into joy and unity. Um, and so it is, it's a place. I had a vision of everybody. What if everyone could just express themselves fully and not worry about how it's received, and the other person could receive it and not like think it's about them, like it just is free expression. And that's what the yoga for joy is meant to be, a place where people can go and get a workout but also express like whatever it is that's going to come up for them.
Oh, I just had a vision. I just
What's
got
that?
I just got one of those downloads. Jake, I clearly see you as like the next celebrity yoga person. Like I see you in the middle of it. Hollywood's calling
Mm.
your name, man.
I love that. I've always connected with Richard Simmons.
Yes.
So
100%.
I'm gonna have to start watching some of his videos.
Oh my gosh, and back in the day, way back in the day. Oh my good gosh. Wild, wild. So you're on fire, like literally.
Mm.
Yeah. Like in the flow of life.
Yeah,
Um,
I found that
wow.
focus
How's
point.
your relationships? Because I always like to go back to relationships, right?
Yeah,
You talked
yeah,
about community. I know you have a couple of kids. What are your relationships in your life like? Because for me, that was the most healing that occurred, was being able to be in true relationship with people and not react
yeah.
to just human things.
It's interesting. So what I've learned recently is relationships are absolutely two-sided, and so the most difficult relationships that I have, with only a couple people, and I've done so much forgiveness work and so much, you know, coming to terms with the past so that we can move forward.
Yeah.
Um, but the other person still has a big role, and in these difficult relationships, the other person still sees me as that old person, and
Isn't
so
that
they
always the case? You
want,
know what? There's a great example of this, Jake. This is perfect. I just read this the other day.
yeah,
It's like addicts, when they go into a recovery program,
mhm,
they are going to be 30% more likely to have success if they do not return to where they
mm,
came from. In other words, if they go back to where they came from, the people see them as addicts always.
yep,
They'll never not be an addict to
yeah,
them, to the people around them. So they'll be expected to act like an addict. Their success rate, probably higher than 30, but 30% higher success rate, which is probably why they have, halfway houses and stuff completely outside of the jurisdiction of the people. But to your point, it's like those people that you're in relationship with still see you, although you've moved on into a different iteration of you. they still see you as that person that they dealt with and interacted with historically.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. And so that, yeah, and so that's the part, that I'm working through right now with the people that that I still love and that are important, that will be part
Of
of my
course.
life forever. Um,
Yeah.
but it is like, yeah, you can be a totally different person, and still have to work with where that other person is at. Um, and so these new relationships that I have are just like so positive and amazing and all of that. And then the other relationships are challenging,
Yeah.
and I learn a lot through them. But
I was going to say again, the dark, the hard, the relationships like that, you learn the most. I've learned the most about me, and in looking at the behavior, going back and figuring out where that began. What was that
Mhm,
thing that happened that put this reaction in play? Because it's always that.
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's always that
absolutely.
subconscious mind filtering all this stuff coming in and saying, here you go. Here's what
Mm.
we think.
Yeah, here's what's going to protect you the best. Here's the limited slice of reality that
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
align
Yeah.
with what you already know and will protect you.
Yes. We'll protect you
Yeah.
from that beast. Yes. Oh, it's beautiful, man. It's beautiful. And here we are. So here we are.
Here
Here
we
we
are.
are. What a great conversation.
Yeah,
Oh, brother. I mean, an amazing life, is it not?
it is.
What do
And
you feel
it's
about this concept? We were both in the One Heart curriculum. We had to read a book by Michael Singer called The Surrender Experiment. And
mhm,
for me, when I read that book, it was like reading an autobiography. I'm like, holy
mhm,
shit, this is me in a nutshell in the last 5 years. Turbulent for sure, but
mhm.
in surrender to this, to the universe, to the flow. What's
Yeah,
your take on that?
yeah. So I read his other book before that. What is it called? Not The Surrender Experiment, the one before that. Um, The Untethered Soul. And that one I found, that one's kind of more of, not more, but it's more of a spiritual book, I guess, in that's about like ideas and philosophies.
Yeah.
And that one I found incredibly helpful, and it just felt so good to learn that knowledge. Um, the With the surrender experiment, also incredibly helpful, and I think about it pretty regularly. I have some cards right over here, a deck of cards from that. Um, that plays out in my day to day life a lot, in the lessons from that book, because like right now, I still have a full time job in tech, and my soul wants to do something else. And so there is an act of surrender every day in knowing that, this, I'm here, I'm on this path and this career that I chose,
Yep.
and there's a reason for me to be doing this, even though I may not know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that there's that aspect of surrender is so critically important to be able to open up to the gifts that the universe and spirit and everything has for us. Because surrender, um, another way of looking at that is receiving, or receivership. Because
Yes.
when we surrender, we are opening ourselves up to receive.
Yeah.
And it's really like receiving can't be it's not a taking, right? There we first are going to serve. We
Yep.
serve and we give and give. And once we serve, then we can de-serve. Right? You serve to de-serve. And and when you deserve something, that's when you receive it.
Oh,
And that, and you almost, and it almost implies a state of surrender, being, open to receive what these gifts are that you now
it's the
de.
most amazing life. Really, truly is. I don't know about you, but in kind of expressing that since our ayahuasca moments together.
Hmm.
I've gotten really good at feeling when I'm on the path. It's
Mm.
almost as if I'm a blind man walking through the valley and I'm just kind of feeling the path. And I
Yeah.
know I'm near the cliff and not going in the right direction. I move back on the path. Like life happens and there are opportunities and things that you think you should do. And then you start to panic and think you should do something else.
Yep.
I've gotten really good at feeling when I'm not on the path. Like it
Mm.
becomes very evident and clear in the level of anxiety or
Yeah.
fear that I experience in a particular direction. I just get right back on the path.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah, that's such a gift to be able to do that, and a
Yeah.
talent. It's like emotions are barometers to know if we're fulfilling our desires or what we're meant to be doing.
Yeah. There you
And
go.
so when we're paying attention to how we feel, then that's how we can know we're doing the right thing. It's
Yeah.
not a logical path, right? It's
No,
not a path
no.
you can just
And that's,
see.
I think, where the disconnect comes in, right?
Yeah, wanting it to make logical sense. And
Wanting
what
it to
makes,
make, we always want it to make logical sense. And all this stuff that we're talking about, especially in the sort of the psychedelic medicine modality, the psychedelic realm, that isn't supposed to make sense. We
mm-mm.
try, we try, we try. It's not going to make sense. Yeah.
Yep,
It's
it's not
beautiful.
going to.
Beautiful. Jake, tell us, we can get The Way of Emotions on Amazon. Is it
Yep.
not there? Okay.
It's on
Awesome.
Amazon. Yep, and
On
I think
Amazon.
there's gonna be a website here soon too. So
Look for Jake Trigg. And if you're ever in Austin and you want to do some yoga, some amazing Kundalini yoga called Joy of Yoga,
yoga for joy. Yep.
Yoga for Joy, look up my man, Jake Trigg. Yeah, brother. Thank you for being a guest on the nurseMARK podcast.
Hmm.
Anything that you want to share when we wrap this thing up?
I feel very complete, and I really appreciate this conversation.
You know what? I could have a conversation with you every single day, bro.
Oh
We
yeah.
go deep. We always have these really meaningful conversations. And I always feel loved and heard. And,
Mm.
I just want to say, love you
Yeah.
and
Me too.
excited to walk this path together, brother.
There we go.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, folks, we're going to have, all of Jake's contact info and the show notes. Check it out. So much to offer. And this is the end of the first episode of the new nurseMARK podcast. Thanks for joining us. I used to have this thing, Jake, called the Daily Love, where
Yeah.
I'd get on every single morning and I'd do a little reading from a spiritual text, and then I give sort of my feel of it. And then at the end, I would say, you know what I'm going to say? Have the best day ever. And I'm still going to say that. Wherever you're listening, wherever you are, night or day, have the best day ever.
Have the best day ever.
Yeah.